When the American Insurance Group, or AIG, was on the brinks of collapse, many government leaders said it was simply too big to fail. In total, the company received more than $173 billion in bailout funds. And when it became widely reported this week that the company is handing out $156 million in bonuses, Congress expressed outrage, and the House passed a tax that would take back 90% of those bonuses. But how can we move forward? Congressman Brian Bilbray is a Republican representing the 50th District. Congressman, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Great to be with you this morning.
All right, so this week we saw a game of almost who could be more outraged about this bonus thing. But there is genuine anger out there from constituents that Congress might not be working, the system is not working, and what happened here? What went wrong with AIG? And more importantly, how can we make sure that something like that doesn't go wrong again in the future?
What you saw this week was a whole lot of members of Congress who had voted for the original bailout, covering themselves because they realized that they had not just economically exposed the federal government and the taxpayer, but politically exposed themselves by writing a blank check to groups like AIG. So all of this outrage that you saw among Congress members on the House floor, you see the majority of them that were the most outraged were the ones who had voted for this bill to start with. So I think what we learn in this is, look, you don't write blank checks and not expect this kind of thing to happen. I mean, that is why I voted not just once but twice against this. But then again, you know, when I was in my 20s, I was a mayor and a council member. I learned real early that somebody comes in and asks me for a lot of money, you darn well better make sure that it's going to go to the right place, and not this attitude of trust me. And I don't care if it was a Bush administration or this administration. Congress still has a responsibility to take care of every dollar that we have extracted from taxpayers and make sure it goes in the right place. And it didn't happen here. So this whole thing, for a lot of people in Congress, was really just trying to cover themselves for a mistake that they had made last year.
But would you say that taxing something 90%, is that even legal?
I think that absolutely it's legal, because what we've done is we have amended our Constitution to allow the federal government to tax in any manner. We actually did that at the turn of the century. The whole thing that created the IRS actually gave us almost a blank check to abuse the system in any way we want.
So you do believe it's legal. Another thing that we've heard a lot this week from your Republican colleagues is that it's time for Secretary Geithner to go, should resign his office based on some of the things that happened with this AIG situation. Do you join them in that call?
No, I don't. I don't. But I do say you darn well have got to look at them. And I joined with them in a proposal that I'd like to know, tell us, what did you know, when did you know it, and who did you tell? And then let's make a decision about Geithner after we get the facts. Again, we're falling into this trap, be it give money away or call for people to resign. Let's get the facts first and then make an informed decision. And everybody is scrambling to try to cover themselves, and if it means throwing Geithner, under the bus to cover yourself politically, they'll do it. I don't think that's right. I think that if he made these mistakes, if there was a cover-up, if he knew about it, who did he tell, why didn't he tell them if he didn't, and why wasn't this put out earlier? Then I believe that if Geithner is guilty of wrongdoing, then you call for his resignation, not at a time when there's outrage against Congress because of mistakes Congress made in the past. And so this president has got to work with the Congress, but Congress and this president got to be willing to tell the American people who knew, when did they know, and why didn't they tell people?
On this question of covering themselves, it seems like Congress is not reading some of these bills because they're not being given the time to read some of these bills. How can something like that happen, and how can that be stopped?
Oh, let me tell you something. The stimulus package that was passed under this new administration is a great example of that. In January, Congress passed a rule that you have to have at least 2 days to look at a bill. In February, they suspend that and go to a system that said at 11:50 at night we're going to introduce a bill, and at 9 o'clock the next morning we want you to vote on it. And this is a bill that's over 1,000 pages long. In fact, there was a challenge made by John Boehner, the Republican leader, and I got to give him credit. Stood up and said, "Has one person read this?" And nobody could say yes. And then they said, "We don't have time." Well, wait a minute. You don't have time to make an informed decision. That is an excuse for people to push through things that is by nature going to create it. And even Bob Filner, who we disagree on a lot of things, but even Bob, who supported the bill, said there was so much stuff stuck in here it was outrageous. And I got to agree with him that we've got to say, stop. We're not going to be bullied on this. And I saw this when we talked about the AIG bailout. I saw this when the so-called stimulus. And the argument was, you got to do something. And if you don't do what we tell you to do, you don't care. And all I got to say is I turned to him and said, you got to do something, is what one lemming says to the other lemming just before they jump off the cliff. And what's happened this week is Congress realized they not only jumped off a cliff, they dragged the American taxpayer with them.
And final question, real quick, is there reason for people to be confident right now?
No. No. But I think there is a feeling to be more confident that their outrage hit home, that Congress is now hearing the footsteps behind them of mad taxpayers that are saying, from now on, you better watch it. And I think that's where you're going to see this outrage will stop the next the next bailout that was coming. There was a whole new bank bailout being proposed by the Obama administration. I think this outrage, this citizen call for accountability, will slow down Washington, and they're now going to take the time. So I think the good thing is this, that I think that reform will come, not because people in Washington want it, because the American people demand it, and just for their own political survival, they're going to change their way.
Well, Congressman, thanks for coming here. Thank you also for your graciousness when we were in Washington.
Anytime.
You were a great host and doing some interesting work on solar energy and on some cars, the Aptera car here in San Diego as well. Thank you for that. And for more information on the Congressman and on AIG and how to get in touch with Congressman Bilbray, you can go to our website, which is sandiego6.com.